Welcome to Lancaster Safety's Webinar Wednesday. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We host free monthly webinars open to all, and our clients enjoy full access to our library of safety and health webinars, newsletters, checklists, toolbox, training guides, and more via our safety management portal. Here at Lancaster Safety, we're a full-service OSHA management company dedicated to going beyond the standard. And we know that OSHA compliance can feel so overwhelming, so today we're simplifying that for you. We're going to break it down to the must-know essentials, and we're going to give you a true starter guide for any business owner. So be sure to have a pen and paper ready. You're definitely going to want to take notes. So today we're joined by two really exceptional safety professionals from Lancaster Safety. Emily is a senior safety and health professional with the Lancaster Safety team since 2021. Emily brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to today's session. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Safety Management, where she graduated summa cum laude. Emily's background includes coordinating safety on construction job sites, serving as a lead instructor for both classroom and online safety trainings, and facilitating first aid and CPR courses. She's fluent in both English and Spanish, making her an accessible and effective communicator across diverse workforces. Known for her approachable style and sharp attention to detail, Emily is passionate about fostering safe, inclusive, and proactive work environments. And then we have Dean, who, if you've joined us before, you're familiar with, but Dean has more than 30 years in experience in engineering, construction, education, and safety leadership. As a safety professional with Lancaster Safety since 2018, he conducts safety audits, OSHA training, and compliance consulting across multiple industries. Dean's background includes roles as a plant manager, project superintendent, corporate trainer, and adjunct professor. As a national instructor and curriculum designer, he served on the CSI Education Committee and taught for IFMA and BOMA. With degrees in engineering, economics, and education, Dean is recognized for his contributions to safety and continues to mentor and support industry professionals nationwide. We're really fortunate to have worked with him for a number of years and appreciate the expertise that he brings to our clients. So I'm really excited for you all to hear from both of these speakers. I know it's going to be really beneficial. So just a quick agenda outline of what we're going to go over today. We're going to give you a brief introduction to OSHA, which businesses have to comply with OSHA laws, how to find out what OSHA laws are applicable to your company, action steps and implementation methods when starting from scratch, and the option to address safety and health at the workplace. So first up, let's take a few minutes just to briefly review what OSHA is and what they help businesses to do. We know some businesses have a negative perception or see them as a scary agency, so let's just debunk that for you. So we're just going to start with a quick quiz. Our first question of the day is, what does OSHA stand for? You can put your answer down in the chat box where the little question symbol is. And I'm going to turn it over to Emily to give you the answer.
All right, so that answer is C, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
That's right, Emily. It was established by the Occupational Safety Health Act of 1970, and OSHA's purpose is to ensure safe and healthful working conditions for all U.S. workers. The key pillars of their mission: first, they set minimum standards for safety performance. Second, through inspections and other means, they have enforcement. And most importantly, education and training. Because at its core, OSHA exists to protect America's workforce, to make sure every employee returns home safely at the end of the day.
So the first step whenever we are getting started with OSHA compliance, it really comes down to research and just kind of researching internally within your own company as to what is your coverage under OSHA. We want to make sure that every company understands how OSHA does apply to them and their scope of business. So that is something where we just have to start by taking a look at the operations. So the question is, do you have to comply with OSHA? And a lot of you probably do. OSHA does cover most industries and most employers. So OSHA regulations do apply to most private sector employers and their employees, and some public sector employees through various state plans as well. There are, of course, some exemptions. So examples of exemptions include self-employed individuals who have no employees, farms that would employ only their immediate families, state and local government workers, again, unless they're covered otherwise by a state OSHA plan, and then businesses that are going to be regulated by other agencies. So examples of that include mining, nuclear energy and weapons, and some transportation industries. But overall, most businesses are going to be covered by OSHA, and therefore a lot of companies need to be aware of the OSHA requirements that do apply to them.
You're exactly right, Emily. So what exactly are the requirements that OSHA has for businesses? Well, first and foremost, and it's often called the General Duties Clause, and it's part of the actual law, the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, that workers are asked and required to provide a workplace free from serious and recognized hazards that could cause or likely cause injury or death. Second is compliance with applicable OSHA laws. So in other words, some requirements in general industry, construction, etc., will apply to you, others will not. And third, and most important, for you to take a look and examine your workplace conditions to ensure compliance and be proactive to eliminate hazards. Part of Lancaster Safety's approach is to stress the importance of creating a great safety culture at your workplace. Because as a business owner, you don't want anyone to get hurt. You not only want to comply with the law, but you also want to minimize expense and maximize profits. And you're not going to do this unless you have a successful safety program. And a successful safety program will do that. And Lancaster can help show you how.
As Dean mentioned, the general duty clause is something that employers need to be aware of. So the general duty clause is kind of this overarching concept that if there's not a specific standard for a given hazard or a violation in the eyes of OSHA, they can essentially use the general duty clause to cite something. So it kind of is that catch-all clause where if it's not something that's specifically stated otherwise, you as the employer still need to make sure that you're providing a safe workplace for your employees. So what you can kind of take away from this is that there needs to be safety leaders that need to be able to find and fix hazards. Again, not everything is going to be directly mentioned in the standards, but if we have the ability to review and assess the given hazards in the workplace, we can then go ahead and eliminate those hazards and not have to get cited by the general duty clause.
Exactly right. When you look at the OSHA laws and regulations, you'll take a look and you'll find you want to reference the industry that you are in. The two main ones, 29 CFR. 29 is the number given to the Department of Labor, where OSHA is housed. CFR is Code of Federal Regulations. And 1910 is general industry. And OSHA's general industry standards include manufacturing, wholesaling, retailing establishments, and they may also apply to any industry to the extent that they supplement specific standards for an industry. 29 CFR 1926, which applies to employers and workers engaged in construction work, which OSHA defines as construction alteration and/or repair, including painting and decorating. Some companies must comply with both General Industry 1910 and Construction Regulations 1926 due to the type of work you perform. Did you know there are different regulations for different industries? For example, if you use scaffolding in general industry, there's a standard that outlines applicable regulations, and there's also a standard that outlines regulations for construction work. OSHA also has standards for maritime, agriculture, record keeping, and more.
So let's talk a little bit about how to implement a safety program. So there are these standards that cover the various industries that Dean mentioned. So what we want to do is be able to research and make sure we know what OSHA regulations apply to the business, and then have a clear understanding as to what specific standards are affecting you, and then we go forward from there. So building a comprehensive safety program is something that does require a few various components. So we're going to first start by talking about the written program side of things. What written programs do you as an employer need to make sure that you are providing to your company and to your employees? So written programs are going to be sets of written policies, procedures, responsibilities, essentially outlining the overall requirements for safety. Now, not only does OSHA require companies to have written safety programs, but oftentimes if you're ever working with other contractors or for clients that might require you to have various safety programs in place, that is something that can be done through a pre-qualification process. So if that's something that applies to you, that is something that you want to keep in mind as well. You need programs not only for you, but also for the companies that you're working for. So Lancaster Safety wants to make sure that we are providing custom written safety programs to our clients. And what we do is we complete an audit to first figure out what exactly are your operations, what hazards do apply to you, and how can we then make sure that your programs contain the requirements that you need to follow in order to be safe based on your hazards. So all of this information and all of the OSHA regulations can be put into a complete safety program, and that way you can be OSHA compliant. Now, as I mentioned, there are certain programs that are required to be in writing by OSHA, so that if that's something that you are unsure of, that is definitely something that we want to take a look at. We do know that there are a lot of program templates and samples online, and those are great at times. However, OSHA really wants to see company-specific programs that cover your workplace. They want it to be specific to you and to your company. So after these programs are written and developed, we then need to make sure that employees are trained on these programs and on the hazards that they are actually exposed to. Once we talk about the hazards they're exposed to, that's when we can go and talk about the necessary safety requirements to protect them from those hazards. And we will send this to you that helps you determine what programs you need, what needs to go in them, and how to implement them. So this is something that we want to make sure that everybody is aware as to what written safety programs would apply to them and needs to be actually written and put into practice. So that is something that we want to make sure everybody is comfortable with, and we can help you assess what programs you actually need.
So you've spent time developing your program policy and practices. Don't let them gather dust on a storage shelf. Utilize these. Remember to review and update each program on a regular basis. Every time your company updates procedures, policies, changes in material, new equipment, you need to retrain employees on those changes, because you want to make sure to implement the procedures in your written programs and ensure they properly reflect your workplace's operations. So very much like quality assurance and quality control, it's a continuum. You keep working at it. As one thing changes, you adjust the other. By doing this, your policies, procedures match up with your practice. And you do that, you're well on your way to creating a tremendous safety culture.
Another aspect of that safety culture is making sure that we are providing training to employees. So training is something that needs to happen once we have written programs developed. That way we can teach employees how to best implement the requirements that are outlined in the program. So we want to make sure that the safety hazards that people are exposed to, they then have training on. So training is required at a few different times. You can't just train once and then call it a day. So that is something that we want to make sure is understood by everybody. So training does have to be conducted when employees are first hired or when they're first assigned to a specific task that exposes them to that hazard. And then there are requirements for annual training, and sometimes even more frequently. It just depends on the specific hazard and what the standard actually says for that. So whenever we do training, we want to make sure that training is documented. We want to keep record of all safety and health training, because in the eyes of OSHA, if it's not documented, then it didn't happen. And that's something that's really important to keep in mind. We want to make sure that documentation is something that is consistently kept up with, and we make sure that it is available for if you ever have to look back to it, or for example, if there was ever an injury or an incident at work, OSHA will most likely first ask, well, what kind of training did you guys have? Did this person know the hazards and know the safety requirements? So we want to make sure everything is documented accordingly. That way it can be proven that the training was actually completed. And in terms of what training is required, that is a big question, and it is something that we do have to take a look at. We really do have a lot of good resources and information on what training you need. We do have actually a whole webinar dedicated to that one question. So we will kind of go over a brief overview of all of that today. But if you're interested in that webinar and what OSHA training requirements are, we will make sure that we post a link to the recording. That way everybody has access to that previously recorded webinar. So this here is our safety training frequency chart, and this is something that is really helpful to actually see, because you can see here the check marks indicate what training is required on an initial or first hire basis or initial exposure to a certain hazard. So that's when a training is going to be required for that specific topic. And then there are plenty of OSHA standards that outline the requirements for annual training. And even if annual training isn't directly required in the OSHA standard, it is still very much recommended to still provide training, or at least a little refresher, on an annual basis. And that can be documented as well. It actually shows that you're going above and beyond that specific requirement by doing annual training on a topic that it's technically not recommended or not required for. Periodic training, that's going to be something that could be more frequently, or it could be done, as necessary. And then, of course, we want to make sure that this is just something that is aware for all topics. So this is a chart that we will make sure that we provide you with as well if you're interested, because this is something that is really helpful to see. And it does go over the federal OSHA standards as well as the California OSHA standards that you can see in that far right column.
And Emily, you're exactly right, because if you look at the training requirements booklet that OSHA has on its website, it's over 225 pages long. So it's nice to have this summarized on a simple chart that will help get you started. We know that training can be conducted in multiple ways. And so the key is, what is right? What is most efficient for your company? There are pros and cons to all the options, and we're listing some things here. Online training is very popular. It is engaging for a lot of employees. It allows them a chance to ask questions, open a dialogue. Oftentimes, instructors will take the time to tailor the training directly to the employee's job task and what hazards they're exposed to in your workplace. Additionally, if more intensive or directed training is needed, such as hands-on demonstrations to determine proficiency, this can also be completed at or about the same time. Training can be conducted in multiple ways, but what's right? What's efficient for your company? There are pros and cons to each option we're showing here. On-site training is the most popular. It's most engaging for employees. It allows them a chance to ask questions and open a dialogue. Instructors will take time to tailor the training directly to the employee's job tasks and what hazards they are exposed to in the workplace. Additionally, there's more intensive or directed training needed, such as, say, as hands-on demonstration to determine proficiency. This can be completed at or around the same time. As with, again, all options, there are some cons. On-site training obviously is limited to training at one location at a time, which also means you're responsible for dealing with the logistics of your team's schedule. Next up is called live online training. This is the closest thing to on-site training, but it does provide you with more flexibility, and it offers a high level of engagement and customization. You can run into some technical issues. It does also limit the opportunity to pair with hands-on training. And lastly is training through a learning management system. These types of trainings are typically module-based and allow employees to complete training anytime, anywhere. Employees can work at their own pace, and there are more automated reporting capabilities. This style does require students, though, to have a level of computer skills, and again, you can run into technical issues. So, which is best? I have found that all of these have value, and I would encourage, if you have not done this before, or if you have, I would try all of these to find out which works best for the various employees in your company. Something that's easily overlooked, hanging up the OSHA workplace poster. If you go online, there's a lot of companies where you can purchase the OSHA poster, but hey, your tax dollars at work, you can get this for free. Just click on the link in the chat to find out how to obtain your free copy. Also, make sure your employees read and understand this poster that goes over their rights. So to recap, we need to make sure we conduct worksite and workplace inspections regularly to find and fix hazards. Second, develop, implement, and maintain written safety programs. And third, provide employee safety training on an ongoing basis. Next, let's go over OSHA's record keeping and reporting. This is another topic we've dedicated an entire webinar to, which we host annually in January. Today, we'll just cover a basic overview of what it is. The OSHA record keeping refers to the process of documenting and maintaining records of serious work-related injuries and illnesses. It is required by OSHA for most businesses. Some businesses are required to report injuries and illnesses electronically as well. These records help employers and employees and OSHA evaluate workplace safety, identify hazards, and prevent future incidences.
So let's talk a little bit more about record keeping. So if your workplace has more than 10 employees, you must maintain the work-related injuries and illnesses on the OSHA 300 logs. There are a few different forms, so we're going to talk a little bit about each one. So the first form that we want to think about is the OSHA Form 300. Now, this is a log of work-related injuries and illnesses. So if an employee is ever injured at work, and if it's anything beyond a first aid treatment, that is going to have to be documented on the OSHA Form 300. Now, there is also the OSHA Form 300A. This is something that is posted on an annual basis for the year prior. So the OSHA Form 300A is a summary of the work-related injuries and illnesses from the past year. And that is something that needs to be posted and visible for the employees of your company. So that is something that is going to be posted from February 1st to April 30th. That way employees are able to see what actually happened and it's not anything being secretive. Now the OSHA Form 301, that is going to be an injury and illness incident report. And this can be used to actually document any of the work-related incidents that occur. Overall, record keeping can be extremely confusing. And of course, we have a lot of experience in this industry, so we do have another webinar, again, specifically on record keeping, and that is something that can hopefully break things down a little bit further if you have any questions on that. Of course, there are always some very interesting scenarios and situations, so record keeping is something that at first might be a little hard to understand, but overall there are some pretty basic and straightforward requirements as to what needs to be done following any sort of work-related incident. OSHA does have all of these forms in a convenient packet. That way you can keep track of everything. It does come with instructions. It's a nice packet that has all of the documents you need and instructions on when and where to document things. There are, of course, very unique circumstances that could be a little difficult to navigate. So whatever you might think is or isn't recordable, we can definitely help with that, and we can provide a record keeping and reporting guide for you as well.
Record keeping and recording are absolutely essential, and OSHA requires that any work-related injury, illness, fatality be recorded. However, there are 4 situations that OSHA specifically requires you to report. A fatality must be reported to OSHA within 8 hours. This can be done by calling the 800 number. It can be done online. Second is that if there is an inpatient hospitalization of any employee, or an amputation, or a loss of an eye, any one of those 3 situations occur, that must be reported to OSHA within 24 hours. Again, the key is this: all work-related injury, illness, fatalities must be recorded. But these 4 incidences, fatalities within 8 hours, inpatient hospitalization of any employee, amputation or loss of an eye, must be reported within 24 hours. In the event of an employee injury or illness, an accident investigation is absolutely necessary to be conducted. because this will help you determine if the injury or illness is recordable and or reportable. These investigations should also be conducted if an employee did not get injured, because the purpose is to determine what happened, how it happened, and how to prevent it from happening again. So in addition to employee injuries caused by accidents, you can also run into a loss in production, equipment, or materials, and a variety of other costs associated with them. Just one accident could be enough to crush your business and create a hole you might not climb out of. An example shown here, based on using OSHA's injury calculator, you'll see that an accident that results in, say, an amputation could easily cost $200,000 in both direct and indirect costs. Direct costs, well, those are your medical bills, your downtime, equipment loss, replacement of materials, etc. Anything that directly occurs around the accident. The indirect costs are the ones that go beyond and that occur after the accident and are usually much greater than the direct costs. This can be legal bills, OSHA fines and citations, increases in workers' comp rate, training new employees, increases in insurance costs, reputation, a variety of things that oftentimes are difficult to measure. The point being is this: with all the costs accounted for, if a company had 10% gross margins, you would need to generate, in this example, nearly $2 million in new revenue just to cover the one accident. Think about that. How long would your business need to work to generate a couple million in revenue? It could be a year, 2 years, but whatever it is, you're basically working for free.
Following a work-related incident or injury, that can then trigger an OSHA inspection. Now, OSHA inspections don't necessarily have to just occur following a work-related incident. They can also happen for other various reasons. Any random inspections that OSHA has planned can also be done, but an OSHA inspection is most likely going to happen after a work-related incident is reported to them. So we do have a lot of information on what to do if OSHA does show up. So we want to make sure that that is something that is available to you as well, and you can get some more information on the OSHA inspection process. Now, we of course will go over a little bit of this now, but we actually had 2 of our safety professionals host a webinar specifically on this topic, and one of them was actually a former OSHA compliance officer himself. So there's a lot of great insight on that. So what do we want to do if OSHA shows up? First and foremost, you can absolutely ask the reason for the inspection. Why did OSHA show up? And of course, that is something that they will tell you. If it was following a complaint, OSHA can then provide you with a copy of that complaint and make sure you're aware that that is the specific reason why they're there. We then can make sure that we have a member of management or a member of the supervision team available to walk with the OSHA inspector. We can absolutely make sure that we politely ask the inspector to wait for just a moment while you get the appropriate person that can then walk with them through the site. So we want to have a designated person with that inspector. And we can also start gathering some documentation while you are waiting. OSHA will most likely be asking for various documents, but first and foremost, they're always going to look to see, do you have your injury and illness logs, those OSHA 300 logs that we just went over? Do you have those ready for review? Are you maintaining them? Do you have them documented? So this is all kind of a big continual process of implementing a safety program. All of these various things we've talked about, such as written programs, training, OSHA record keeping logs, these could all come into play in the event of an OSHA inspection. Now, again, we do have a lot of information on what to do if OSHA shows up, and what we like to say, survive the OSHA inspection. There's going to be a lot of stuff kind of going on, but overall it is nothing to worry about. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to know the basics of what to do. Now, during the actual walkthrough with the inspector, we want to make sure that we recommend staying with the inspector and accompany him or her at all times. Anytime that the inspector is asking for information, you of course can give them that information. However, you don't have to volunteer information that they're not asking for. Sometimes it might feel like it will help with the situation or might give some better insight or kind of good grace to what they're there to look at, but it can also trigger some more questions and a further deeper investigation on a particular issue that they might not have initially been there for. Anytime the OSHA inspector is taking notes or taking pictures of anything on the site, you should also take those notes and take those same pictures. The inspector should be fairly communicative throughout the actual inspection and should be telling you these things so you're able to take notes and take the same pictures that they are. So it is important to document the same things that they do for your reference, and that way you can also have the exact same information that they have. You, of course, can provide them with any of the information and documentation that they request. Again, you can only provide the ones that are specifically requested. You do not have to volunteer further documentation. And then we want to make sure that any violations that are found throughout are fixed immediately if possible. OSHA loves to see prompt action. They like to see when a company takes the violation seriously, and if it is something that can be fixed relatively easily, that is something that can be done the same day while the OSHA inspector is there, and OSHA would definitely be able to take that into consideration and make sure that they are seeing your good faith efforts in fixing those violations.
Once the walkthrough is completed, then the OSHA inspector is required to conduct what's called a closing conference. And that may immediately follow after a simple inspection or may follow a major inspection by several weeks. In a sense, the OSHA inspector is like a detective. They're gathering information. So the closing conference is an opportunity for you to promote your company's safety programs and commitment to safety. And OSHA will look at this. It is a definite factor they consider when establishing the penalty amount if a citation is to be issued. So you may be asked to establish timelines for correcting alleged violations. Be cautious with this in setting dates. Make sure you give yourself enough time. You do want to correct things as quickly as possible, but however, conducting training, installing new machine guarding, having error monitoring conducted, all those things can take up time to prepare, to set up, and to execute. It's always encouraged to request an informal conference, and you as the employer can do that. And you can do that with your area director within 15 working days if you receive a citation. There's some real advantages in asking for this informal conference, and the Occupational Safety and Health Act allows for this, the area director to do this. Several advantages include possible penalty reduction. There could be an extension of abatement dates if necessary. You may even have an alleged citation deleted or rescinded or reclassified. It also helps to discover more facts to determine whether or not you want to contest the citation, as well as an opportunity to create open communication with that area director. So once an informal settlement is reached or not reached, if you decide to contest the citation, alleged violation, employers must file a formal notice of contest within 15 working days from the date of receipt. Citations are normally issued either hand delivered or mailed through certified or registered approaches. You will never get a phone call, a text, an email from OSHA saying here's a citation. That is not official.
So we've covered a lot of information so far about each part of the implementation of a safety program. And yes, this of course is a basic overview and there is some more detail that goes into this, but we want to really make sure that this overall concept is something that companies are aware of. So we're next going to cover some options that safety leaders have to budget and plan for the future success of their safety program.
Well, every action you take makes your company safer. It's really simple. Where do you start? It really is quite simple and common sense. Start with anything that makes you safer. Safety committee, writing written programs, conducting hazard assessments, working with your employees at all levels, because safety is a journey, not a destination. And it really starts with a single step today. Just start. Don't wait. In my 5+ decades in construction and industry, I've had 6 recordable incidences. And I can tell you that for every dollar I spent on safety, I got back 7. Yeah, you heard me right, 7. For those 6 incidences I had, whatever the direct costs were the day of and indirect, by the time I was done, times 20. So, boy, this safety stuff's expensive. Are you kidding me? You think safety is expensive? Try an accident. And that's the easy part, because that's the money. What about your people? It's challenging to find good people to do good work today. I hear it all the time. But the point being is that I can produce quality products and services, but if I'm not safe, it won't matter, because those people will be hurt and killed. So just start. Start today with something simple. Please don't wait.
We really do appreciate this opportunity to talk about OSHA compliance and where you can start to make a difference in your overall safety program. Like Dean said, all you have to do is start. Any small step that you can take towards the implementation of a safety program is worth it. In the last 21 years, we have helped thousands of companies build their safety program and really make sure that they're providing a safe workplace with the mission of getting their employees home every single day safely. We want to make sure that this is something that you are aware of. And like we said, this is something that we do on the daily. So any start that you can make is going to be worth it in the end.
All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time to listen in today. Dean, Emily, that was just invaluable information, and I hope you guys all were taking notes and paying good attention to it, because you didn't want to miss any of that. We did share a lot of resources in the chat, so make sure you grab those, but we will send those as follow-up as well in an email. If you have any further questions, please give us a call at 888-403-6026, and we'll be happy to help you. Also, make sure you're following us on social media for more news updates and safety information, or you can provide us your feedback on either Yelp, Google, or Facebook. We really do appreciate your time today, and we hope that you'll take advantage of our monthly safety and health webinars. Everyone's always invited to attend, and they're always free. So just visit our website for that information. Thank you so much, and have a safe day.